journey and where it's taken me and who I've met and what we've done and what we've built. You know, it's just been an incredible ride. So to all of you who've been a part of that, I feel incredibly grateful. Okay, so in terms of our call, we haven't several new people on the call today, which I feel really humbled by always. You know, that people see something in this product that 30 years ago on one day was a white sheet of paper and didn't exist, but somehow it connects with people enough that they want to learn more. The purpose of these calls is all about helping you understand yourself so that you can offer up the best version of yourself each and every day for the benefit of your own life and for the people around you that are impacted by you. Everyone is. It's a case of whether we're impacting them in the way that we're proud of or not. So we do a little check-in. The protocol on these calls is to do what we call a peak performance check-in. And I'm just going to show the slide so that you can see it. Where is it? Let me just call it up here for you. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Okay. So for those of you who have shared this journey, you're very familiar with this slide. But for those of you who are new, we call this the peak performance indicator. And what it's saying is that everybody has that green arrow. Everyone has a true self or an ID or a way of doing things that is their best way. And what my work has shown is that that's the nature part of someone's makeup. For years, there was a debate around, well, not years, for literally thousands of years, a debate around whether we're nature or nurture. And what I have found is that there's actually both. There's nature and nurture. But I often use the solar system as a description that although there are, you know, if you think of the nurture side as all the planets, in the middle is the sun. And the sun is the biggest of the planets, and it sort of drives everything. And so the nature element of who we are, which is our ID, our instinctive and innate drives, that is the part of us that maps to our true self. And for centuries, people spoke about being true to yourself, but people didn't have a way of basically defining that. Some people figured it out with experimentation over the years, but with the ID, we have a way of now being able to just define the footprint. It's like building an X-ray machine that just says, this is it. This is the way you're wired. When you are true to that, that's when you get the things at the top of that chart. You know, that's when you give your best performance, when you're most fulfilled and happy, when you have a sense of achievement about what you do, your self-esteem, your self-worth, your self-confidence is all great. And of course, your health and energy are at their best. When you get pulled off track, which is out to the side, not only do you compromise all of those gifts at the top, but you start to experience the things on the horizontal axis, which are forms of stress or distress, as some people like to say. And the greater you're pulled off to the left or to the right, the greater that tension. And so there's an increasing toll that is taken on your life, which initially might be behavioral, but eventually gets to the point where it's a real medical or physical impact, even to the point where it threatens your own life. And whether through illness or whether through mental type illness, you know, where people just go, I can't keep living like this. And some people then make a life change in relationships or career. But some people, when it's, you know, too all-consuming, can get to a point where they just literally don't want to keep living. And I've had people with medical conditions who have said that if this is what my life's going to be like, I can't do this. I'd rather end it. So that's how extreme it can get. So what we want to do is firstly understand ourselves to know what is that green arrow for us? What is my ID to be at my best? And then no matter what life throws at me, whilst it tries to pull me off track, how do I stay pretty close to that green arrow so that we maybe have a little bit of a wobble, but we don't get pulled way off to the sides, you know? And my question for you is, on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being that you're right on the middle line here, you're flying, you know, everything feels like it's just easy and flowing, and a 1 out of 10 is way out to the side, what's your number today? And I'm just going to stop sharing so I can see the chat, because you might want to just put your number in the chat. And if you don't want to put a number because you don't relate as much to a number, you might just want to put, well, I'm, you know, in stride or I'm way out of stride. But you might just want to capture the number that you are. There you are. So you can see there's a whole range, and there's no goods or bads. I mean, it is what's happening to you. Well, I suppose there is a good and bad. There's good if you're a 10, that's shining, and bad can be, people think, well, a 1 is bad, but actually what I've found is that the middle scores are the ones that are not the best, because there's a complacency about being, you know, 6s and 7s. I think because of the way we've been stereotyped, that 7's like a good mark. It's a safe mark. It's better than 50%. It's not perfect, but it's up there. What I would say to you is what I've found with leaders and, you know, people who are doing life well, that you're not casting as much of a shadow at a 6 and a 7. Once you get to a 4 and a 3 and a 2, you're casting a shadow, but it's not the one you want to cast. It's not even good for you. People get to the point where they say, I don't even like who I am anymore. And, you know, my partner or my workmates are saying, you know, who are you? Where are you? Like, this isn't the Paul we know. So all of that type of noise happens depending on whether you're in or out of stride. If you're an 8, 9, or 10, you start to cast a really positive shadow that's, you know, positively impacting the people around you. And not only are you a joy to be around, but it starts to become magnetic. People want to be around you because they will draw their energy from you. So I would encourage you that if you are an 8, don't settle there. There's a big difference between, that's like saying you're a bronze medalist and yep, you're on the podium, but we all know there's a huge difference at the Olympics between bronze and gold. It might only be a few seconds in terms of the time difference, but what happens in the person's life beyond the Olympics, none of us remember bronze, but often we remember who the gold medalist was and all the accolades that come with that. And so I would really encourage you, first of all, to know it is possible to be a 10. And you've seen, is anyone here today a 10? I didn't capture that, whether there's, there you go, Judy, Joe. Wow, Joe, up there at a 10 today. That's awesome. That's fantastic. Is that the first time you've been a 10, Joe? I think it might be close. You've been knocking on that door for a while though, but you know, so it's there you go. There's, okay, thank you. That's possible. And then 9's awesome. You know, that's a great shadow to cast. And then of course, you know, if you're at a 7, you're on your way, but with some strategies, you can very quickly, and often it's not over time, it's a moment, it's a decision that you go, you know what, I'm going to change my perspective on something. You shift it and you get to a better place. So I think this is a really powerful mechanism, not only for you to do, but it's part of what we call the language that, you know, our clients and even families speak, where they can just say to someone, you know, just like you might say, what's your number, or how was your day at work today? And I know with a lot of kids, you can have a mood board where they'll go and put a sunshine up or a cloud up or, you know, a lightning bolt. This is a similar thing where you can just say, what's your number? And someone says, you know, I'm a 7, or I feel like in our marriage, I'm just a 6 and I want it to be a 10, you know, or I'm a 10. So it's a really powerful mechanism. And I just want to create some space now for anyone who'd like to share their number, or for that matter, even get help. If you're, no matter what your number is, even if it's an 8 or a 9, and you want to sort of finesse it and get to a 10 and or stay there, if there's anything on your mind that you want to cover, that's the purpose of this call. And that's the space we've got now to share that. So anyone got something I'd like to ask or share? By the way, I'd say my number's a 9. I don't normally put my number in, but it's not because I'm hiding anything. I just forget to share it. But I'd say today I'm a 9. Anything on people's minds?
Actually, Paul, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, just the reason I am a 10, I suppose, is just because I've got balance back in my life again. So not just looking at work and friends and things, also looking at exercise and self-care, and just, yeah, my life's just full of variety at the moment, which is great.
Good on you. Good on you, Joe. Well, and you know, it's important when you've got your ID, which is an energizing type of ID, and you thrive in that space and around people, when you know that this is the state you're in today, like then it's really good to then show up that way, you know, and sort of go, okay, my influence on people today, not by anything you say or do, just by you being present in the room, you're going to be casting an influence on those people that's really significant. And I think it's just good to know that, you know. It's like walking into a room, and if you were going in and people said to you beforehand, everyone in this room loves you. You know, if you knew you were walking into that changes how you feel about, well, how you feel about showing up. Whereas if someone said, man, everyone's out to get you in this room, you'd go in more protective, or more, you'd be different. You'd be more, you know, alert and concerned. But it's really nice to know when you're in that place, just what oozes out of you is like oxygen for other people.
Thank you.
Judy.
Well, I was going to say, I'm a 10 plus today. And here's, ever since I've been on these calls, I've been making more and more and more and more progress. And so I had a big awareness just within the last week or something. I don't know exactly when. And I accepted the fact that I am a leader. I could see that in me before in all the things that I've done. And yet somebody said, well, I'd say, but yeah, but. And I guess I put on that cloak, the cloak and the hat and the whole outfit. And now I am expressing in that way. So I've had a dream since Joe passed away to carry on his legacy and mine and etc. And I couldn't get clarity about it until last week. It came to me. I'm starting a 501c3 foundation.
And what does that mean for those of us who don't live in Colorado? What does that mean, Judy?
It means it. Do you have corporations there?
We've just had them start in Australia a couple of weeks ago. No, I'm kidding. We've had them. We have corporations.
Okay, so I have an S corp, but this is a 501c3 nonprofit organization to be able to take in donations, and so that so people can get scholarships if they're wanting to be speakers or coaches. They can get scholarships if their funds are limited to be able to do what they want to do, to get their ID as an example, to pay for their ID.
Yeah.
And things have been, since I made that decision, I started on Monday your time. And by last night, just talking to people, I already had 2 donations of $100 each. And we're just getting, we're just doing the paperwork.
Yeah. Yeah.
I noticed something else different. I'm on my HOA board, and we had a board meeting last night. And there's 5 other members and the association person. And I had seen myself being the completer when you said last year, every team needs a completer. Okay, I know my role. So last night I was, my neighbor wants to do something, and I wanted to talk on his behalf. And so I noticed I was talking on his behalf, and all the other people were saying, yeah, but what's the liability? Yeah, but this, yeah, but that, yeah, but what happens if this, and before that I would have gone, shrunk down and thought, well, I better think about it a little bit, Judy. But instead, I just was strong. And they said they needed more information. I thought, oh, I bet some of these people are verifiers. And so then I'm getting people to be on the to be something. I can't remember their name right now. So I called this guy today, and I'm pretty sure he's a verifier. I want to see his ID now, doggone it. And he said, well, have you thought this through? Do you know you have to do all this? You have to submit quarterly reports and all that. You know that? I said, and he's a man who speaks, he's blind. He went blind in 2011, and he speaks on curiosity. And I said, Andre, I don't hear you being very curious. You're not asking me any questions. Yes, I did. I asked you, that was a question I asked you. So he said, I'm going to be very blunt. Okay, great. Go be blunt, Andre. And so he told me, I just don't know for sure and blah, blah, blah. I said, okay, Andre, I'll be blunt. And no stress, just, doggone it, don't tell me I can't do it, because I'm about to show you. So that's what's changed for me.
Good on you, Judy. Well, what happens is, like you make that decision and away you go. Life starts to change. It's all to do with how you've chosen to show up, which is terrific. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank
And
you.
You're welcome. And anybody else got something they want to say? David, I want to say to you, welcome back. I've missed you. I wonder where you've been. I actually spoke to Makers the other day. Welcome back. Nice to see you. And Judy, you might have missed a comment there, but I saw it in the chat. Catherine put in there that your husband mentored her as an emerging speaker, some 30 years ago. That's
Yes.
a really cool connection. Yeah.
Yes,
Thanks
we
for
talked
sharing
about
Catherine.
that here in a private chat.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good on you.
Yes.
What a
I'll tell
small
you
world.
more about it, Catherine. Mhm.
Okay. Anyone else got something they want to ask or share about where they're at right now in terms of being in stride and at their best? Catherine.
I'm always ready to talk, Paul, anytime about anything. I'm going through an extremely exciting time with the launch of a book out of the Hay House stable. And I keep feeling myself slide into, and it's only now an easy reminder into, it'll just flow, just do what turns up for you. And you've got all these other people who are doing the detailed stuff. And it's just a relief and a release and a sheer joy to not slide into I suppose it's almost a lifelong sense of disapproval from others around winging it, right? And I'm a 9 improvise. And I know that if I hold myself back and need to tick off all the black hat things and occupy myself with all the detail, I know that I waste who I am. And I waste what I can create, and I waste what I can give. And I don't want to do that anymore. I might only have another 20 or 30 years left. So, I better make the most of them, because, being a 9 improvise to me is a great gift and I love it.
Yeah.
So it's reminding me this work, which I've never forgotten, but have been immersed in and then just let rest for a while and then come back into it. It's just such a joy and a relief, a release. Oh, yes, just do what you love. And for me, it's actually being in tune about my feelings, not my emotions, right? Because the emotions are not always, they're often too reactive and unsteady.
Yep.
Whereas my feelings in my gut and my heart are responsive, and I can tune in and feel and know. And it's a joy.
Anytime you come from that place, not only will you be fulfilled, but that's, again, that shadow you're casting, it's the best possible influence on others. And, as we all get older, I think although time always goes at the same speed, it certainly feels like it accelerates as the years go on, doesn't it? And you just become increasingly aware of how precious time is and life is, and the difference that you make, so how we show up each and every day is really important. So again, thanks for sharing, Catherine. So folks, what we might do is move on now to the topic for today, which is, and I'll again show some slides here so you can see what we're doing, but it's all about gaining some appreciation of your ID in this context. Let me show you. Is it going forward? So we're building a tool here, which is what others admire and cherish about your ID. And we've already done some work on the verified drive, which I'll show you in a minute. But this is how these tools, for those of you who are new, this is how they end up. And if anyone, some of you probably already have this slide, but we can get it to you, those who haven't. But we've built we've built lots of these matrices. This one is on decision making. We've got others on things like, how to do the things you don't like doing. So as we share through these webinars, we capture a lot of what people share and put them into this model. So it becomes a tool that you've got as a little reference sheet for forevermore. And when it comes to what others admire and cherish about you, we've spent time a couple of weeks ago on this topic, and we sort of dug deeper into the verified drive. And we talked, these were the things that came up for those of you who are verifiers, just to refresh you, the things that came up that stood out to people. So this is other people looking at you and people like you saying, what I really admire about the way that person does life are these things here. The questions they ask, and even knowing what questions to ask, thinking up those questions in the first place, they don't come as naturally to an avoid verify person. Paying attention to the details, coming into something prepared, and having done all the research on it and being able to back yourself up, it's really impressive and earns a lot of respect from others. And then the ability to prioritize. They were the things that were shared. And then for the avoid verify drive, it was this sense of no acceptance. They're the people that don't see life through the lens of right and wrong. They just see it as it is what it is, and they just accept that. And it's very empowering for others around you to feel no judgment about the way that they do things. It doesn't mean they're doing them at their best. It just is, well, it is what it is. And we can talk about how to do it better, but there's not that sense of should. Should is a word that is more, that comes more from the verify mindset than the avoid verify mindset. So people say to me, can you guess someone's ID? And I'm like, well, not really. You can't guess their whole ID, but there are clues. And one of them is like when they use certain words, like if I hear someone saying, well, you should have done this and should have done that and should, that's a clue that maybe they've got a verified drive, because you don't hear the avoid verifiers saying that unless they're being pulled way out of stride and they've got all that pressure from other people around them and they feel that they should, but it doesn't mean that it's working for them. It's why it's causing pressure and stress, because it's not true to who they are. The sense of equality, that they see people on the same equal footing. They'll talk to the janitor with the same enthusiasm and contribution as they would to the CEO or to royalty. The sense of empathy. So we've learned this from these webinars, that avoid verifiers feel empathy, actually feel the feelings, whereas the verifiers can be empathetic, but it's more intellectual. They'll think, they'll get it, they can rationalize it, understand it, but it's not the same as feeling it. Lateral thinking, verifiers tend to have more of a, what's the word? They deduce an empirical way of problem solving and thinking things through. The avoid verifiers will just throw things in from left field. And then the sense of knowing, which Catherine was just referring to, when you can't always articulate or even prove what you know, but you have it as such a strong visceral sense within your gut. It's an absolute compass for how you do things, and can make you, if you trust it, can make you incredibly quick with how you, then it might look like a reaction, but it's actually a response when you're coming from a place of gut. So it's really cool to know, whilst you can read these things about your ID, the perspective we're wanting to share here is, this is what other people value in you. So you might think, for example, well, as a verifier, I'm a really good problem solver, or I'm really organized. Well, maybe you are, but that didn't come up as one of the things that others really admire about you. And part of self-awareness isn't just knowing your own strengths and vulnerabilities. It's also knowing, how am I seen by others? How do I come across? What do others value about me? And therefore turn that up, give more of that. Not always just what you think they might value. And today what we want to do is move into the Authenticate drive and talk about, when you think about those who are the strong authenticators, what is it that you really admire about what they bring to the table? So, and if you're in a relationship with someone like that, what is it that you cherish about the contribution they bring? Because we'll start with the Authenticate drive, and then we'll talk about avoid authenticate. So I'm going to turn this off so I can see you all a little better. but this is what we're going to build. And then we'll, depending on time today, we might get into the complete drive as well. And then we'll keep going with these webinars until we finish it. And then we'll share this as a little tool for you. But this is coming from your words, you know, your examples, your case studies. And I think it's really cool that everyone gets to share in it. So let's talk about the Authenticate drive. So when you think about, it might even be yourself, you know, what is it you admire about yourself that you cherish, but particularly if it's about someone else, I think that's really powerful. And it's nice for people to think that. You might even look at people's scores on the call here and think, you know, those of you who have come to know each other reasonably well, when you think about, you know, someone who's a strong authenticator, I'm thinking right now of someone like Greg Meyer, who some of us have known from the calls, that's been quite prominent. Or Jose, I'm looking at your 7 in Authenticate, you know. There's a number of you here who are strong authenticators. And what is it that you see in people like you? Especially if we can hear from some of the avoid authenticators, what do you see that you really admire?
Paul, I've lived with one for a very long time. The congruence between words and actions, dependability. They won't say anything, or they won't pretend to say they're going to do something or not, and then not do it. So they'll always be true to what they say.
Absolutely.
And it's the honesty factor, absolute honesty, and people I've worked with similarly.
Yeah, don't you? I do love that. As an avoid authenticate myself, I do love that. Like a lot of times my truth can be tempered, like even the words, like I still would consider myself honest, but I'll choose words so that I don't hurt the feelings of the other person, at least try not to. But I do love that it's just a brutal honesty about the authenticator. So it's crystal clear what the issue might be. Yeah. I agree with you, Mike.
I was going to add there, actually, I was going to say WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, and follow that through with the way they they have metaphors, they tell stories, they just see how they explain it in a way. Whilst I often have conflicts with explanations with the authenticator I live with, by the same token, there's this sort of, it's this metaphor. That's the only way I can say it. The way they do it is just sensational.
Yeah, so true, Gail. You know, they just can pick words or phrases or, as you say, a story that creates the picture that's crystal clear. You know, yeah, I admire that too.
Well, I actually know an Authenticate, and if ever I'm wanting to ask about some wisdom or something like that, I'll present something to them or to this person, and she'll just nail it. Yeah. Simple, short, sharp. This is it. This is how it is. Sometimes it doesn't land that well for me, I'll admit, but I go away and I think about it, and she's just simply nailed it.
Yeah, but don't you love how, even though it might hurt, there's something about the hurt that comes from an authenticator that's not a real hurt, you know, because you know it's actually the truth. And I think what's different is when someone says something that's nasty, it hurts because it's, you know, it's not true, but it reflects more an intention to try and hurt you or something, you know. But when an authenticator shares their truth, I think what hurts is the stark reality that we're having to be really honest with ourselves. It's like looking in the mirror and seeing it. It's not because they have an intention. And I've had authenticators over time say, well, I suppose I've got to learn to be less blunt, or I don't want to hurt people. I'm like, it's the hurt's not coming from you. The hurt's coming from what's going on in the mind of the person receiving it because of how truthful it is. There's a very subtle but significant difference there.
Yes, yeah, and her intention is good, like the way she's So,
If I can comment on that. I'm sorry, did I step on someone?
No, but you're probably about to, and that's what we want to hear.
Okay. All right. So yeah, no, the thing about the honesty and being brutal, I mean, that I quite frankly, as an authenticator, I struggle with that, because not everybody receives it very well. So it's kind of worked. This hasn't worked for me, right? So I've been kind of learning to consciously temper it a little bit, and it's a constant struggle for me, right? I have to kind of hold myself back, tap the brakes, and be conscious of it. It's an ongoing struggle for me. Yeah, being this brutally honest.
Yes. Yes, it's good to hear it from you, Dilip, as someone who is an authenticator and a very strong authenticator. So what you're saying is, yes, that's who I am, but it doesn't always come across in your world as a strength, because it can cause a lot of damage to people.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it has happened more than once, and yeah, but it's not something that I can just turn off, right? So
That's true. I mean, that's why we call them instinct. You know, no matter what amount of self-control you might try and exercise, at the end of the day, your instinct will override and come through, you know, so it's there. And what would be interesting for you to reflect on away from the call is whether it's because of you or whether it's because of the people that you're associating with, you know, like, is it that if you think of who are the people in your camp that aren't as affected by your brutal honesty, maybe they're the people you're closest to, and you know they still can get hurt from time to time, but they still value that about you. And maybe it's people who aren't as developed or are insecure or have a lot less IQ, that are the ones who are most affected. And maybe rather than changing you, maybe it's, you know, changing some of the people you interact with. And that for many people in their life journey is a sort of seminal moment where they sort of go, you know what, I've sort of inherited a life, or it's just happened to me. And then they start to get more intentional about who they mix with, who they socialize with, where they spend their time, so that they're more selective about the type of people that they invest into and, you know, connect with. Maybe, I'm not saying it is the issue, but it might be interesting to just sort of think about, can you redirect who you connect with rather than try and change who you are?
yeah, that can help. The other thing that has helped me at times is when when I know that I'm going to say something that may offend somebody, and I kind of catch myself before I say that, right? So I don't want to necessarily completely change it to the extent that it is not true anymore, right? So what I do is not say anything at all, right? Just don't say anything, because if I say it in a different way, it almost feels like I'm lying, right?
Yes.
So I don't want to be caught lying. On the other hand, I don't want to say something that's going to offend, so I just don't say anything.
Yes, but what's cool about life is they say that when we communicate, Dilip, only 7% of the message we convey comes from the words we use. 38% comes from our tone of voice, and 55% comes from our physiology. So by saying nothing, there's still 93% of you screaming out, you know, or maybe 55%, because obviously no tone of voice. So there's still a message even by your silence. And that's why some people can say, you know, you haven't said anything for half an hour, which is saying something, you know, so therefore they can call it out of you. So it's a strategy. I hear you that sometimes silence can be helpful, but there's another way too, you know, because even your silence is still a message.
No, I can confirm that the silence has not worked.
But it's not a bad idea for you to pause and say, is there a way for me to restate this so that it's, you know, not as offensive? You know what I've found to always be the best overarching strategy, no matter what your ID, is to check where your heart is first. Is your heart in a place of wanting to help? And so there's a spectrum. At one end of the spectrum is love and courage. At the other end of the spectrum is fear and anxiety. So you ask yourself, am I coming from a place of love and courage? Or am I coming from a place of fear and anxiety? And at the fear end is also anger and disappointment and frustration, just like at the other end is trust and respect and, you know, all of that, right? So let's think positive, negative, because there's times when something can be, you want to share something and it's still a truth. But whether if you say it from a place of love and courage and wanting to help and grow and expand that person, that is going to land differently, because that's the 38%, that's the 55%. So you can use the same words, but because you're in a different place mentally and emotionally when you share it, it lands so differently. Whereas if you're in a place of anger, disappointment, frustration, same words are going to have the other 93% adding to that, and it will not land as constructively. And I think that's what you can do, is just check yourself. I do that all the time. And there's many times where I'm frustrated and I have to stop. And the pause is just to get myself to a different place and then come in more constructively.
Also, just, sorry, Dilip, just maybe some, another idea is you could also check in with the person. So what my husband does with me is, if I'm telling him something or whinging or whatever, and he'll go, all right, do you want the truth? Do you want me to tell you? Or are you just want some compassion and you just want me to hear you out? And I'm like, yeah, no, I know what the truth is. I don't want to hear that. So just give me a hug and that's it. And let's move on. So, you know, just checking with the person.
Got it. Yep.
You are very good, Amanda. Very good.
I had to teach him a lot. Yeah, it took a long time, but
and if it's not already obvious, so Amanda's married to an authenticator. Those who like the opposite ID to Amanda, pretty much, right?
Yeah. So.
Can I just say, when an authenticator doesn't say something, my ID knows what they were going to say anyway. So not saying it is not actually helpful in a sense. Because I don't know about you, Paul, but I just see it. I feel it. It's there.
Yeah, you feel the vibe. I mean, to be clear, for the authenticators, we don't necessarily know the words you might have used, but the sentiment, we can feel the vibration. I mean, that's the strength of the avoid authenticators, to feel that vibe element. You know, so yeah, you can sense it. Anything else for the authenticators? Sorry, Catherine.
My son is an authenticator, and two things jump out to me, and one is totally related to the last few contributions. Dilip, at school, not at home, but at school, he was labeled passive aggressive, which I think is pretty shocking, that any teacher would tell a child that he's passive aggressive. But I can see that because his truth wasn't valued, he just closed down and emitted it in every other way he possibly could, when he didn't feel honored or safe. And that's been a huge awareness for me, to actually see that happening in him. And we've had that discussion. The other thing I remember about him, one time, I'd been to a particular part of Sydney on a work thing, and I came back and said, oh, wow, I really like it there. When you're, 18 or more and you've left home, I might even go over and live over there. And when he was coming up to his 18th birthday, which was about 3 or 4 years later, he said, Mum, I've been trying to work out where I'll go and live when I'm 18. And I said, darling, what are you talking about? He said, well, you told me a while back that when I'm 18, I'll be going and living somewhere else. And he was literal, completely literal about ideas and fantasies and things that I had shared. To him were fact, because he didn't waffle about ideas and fantasies. He always spoke real, and he had to make it real.
That's true. That's true. Great examples. Great examples. And the other one I would add that stands out to me, because I would agree, I love the literal. It keeps you so honest. The fact they take it literally, and I always love it in conversations when I say something and someone else might say that I'll say something and go, well, what I really mean is, and I say, why don't you just say what you really mean? Like, why are you beating around the bush? And I don't intend to, but I don't have the same gift to articulate it as, precisely or as real as what they do. I tend to have to get there. But the other one is real help. The authenticators are just always out to help. And I remember one time getting ready for a wedding, and someone turned up in a suit, and we had like an hour to go or something, and they were coming to our place we were going to go together. And I had something going on with a drain out the front of our house. And I'm like, oh, I'm not showered yet because I'm fixing this drain. Next thing, they're down there wanting to help, and they're in their wedding. I'm like, don't do that. You're in your, you're already dressed up. And they're like, no, if you need help, I'll help you. And the whole thing of help, it doesn't matter about whether or not how dressed they are or where they're going. They'll literally be the people that put their bodies on the line and, give what I call real help. So it's not just that they're there and directing what's going on. They're in their, sleeves rolled up. And in Australia, the icons in Australia are our surf lifesavers. And when I think about the Authenticator personified, it's really the lifesaver, because they're the people that when someone's out in the surf and they're struggling and they need to be rescued, and someone's got to physically go out and get them and put their own body on the line to save someone else, they don't necessarily want to bring them back in, do all the resuscitation and get them to hospital and whatever else, but they'll get them out of danger and get them back onto shore where others can then take over. But that, to me, that real help. And when I had a situation where I was raising some money a few years ago, and this client of mine donated an extraordinary amount of money. And I rang to check with him, and he's a strong authenticator. And I said to him, Lance, what are you doing? And he said, Paul, you changed my life. And if I'm going to help you, I'm going to really effing help you, And it was like the best lesson of my life was, if you're going to help someone, really freaking help them. And I got that and I've seen that in so many authenticators, that there's a difference between help or involvement and real help, which is huge. So I would want all of you who are authenticators to know, how valuable and how different that element is.
And Paul, to assist in the helping, again, this comes from being married to an authenticator for a long time. They carry a help kit. So in Jeff's car, he's got everything from mouse traps to snake bite kits. In my car, I have my handbag. And it's absolutely extraordinary. And I was with another authenticator last week, and I was actually having a bit of a whinge because I'm sharing a car with Jeff at the moment, and there's nowhere for me even to put my little handbag. And and I said, and there's this here and there's that. And he said, oh, hasn't he got this? I said, oh yes, now you mention it, he has. And he's got things that we don't even need, but in case he stops by the road and someone's in trouble, he's got extra wheel kits and Allen keys and this, that, the other, just in case they're needed. And it's just so it's not just helping, it's a help kit that goes with life.
Yeah, I see it in my kids, like Mitchell is a strong authenticator. I see it too, Gail. So in view of the time, let's move on to the Avoid Authenticate drive and just talk about what stands out to you about the Avoid Authenticators. I suppose there it is, right?
Paul,
so we move on.
Can I just, Paul, if I can just say, so the Avoid Authenticators for me are the ones that really just understand nuance and don't just take that black and white view like I do. So they do ask, it comes back, I guess, a little bit to the Avoid Verify, but asking questions for, no, it's an empathy, it's an understanding and an empathy, and not looking at everybody so black and white as I do. So, like all the other authenticators, I tend to look at things and take them on face value and I really have to remind myself. I'm almost getting a question mark tattooed on my hand just to remember to ask questions and to not take things so black and seriously. I am thinking about, I need a tattoo just here to go with a question mark, ask more friggin' questions, and so it's the thing I really appreciate about the Avoid Authenticate is that that understanding of nuances. And I'm in my husband and I are both 7 in Authenticate, so it's really we just so black and white and so hands-on and doing things. So when other people come into our lives that are like some friends of ours, and they just sit there and look at us and go, "You two are fighting." We're not fighting. We're actually we're vying for position and clarity. But yeah, I love that avoid authenticatability in that.
Yeah.
So I'm repeating myself now. I'll move on.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you.
I admire, and I mean, I work with several of you all that are avoid authenticate, that just that kind of like that deeper sense, the spidey sense that I don't even pick up on with others. So like the ability to not just read the room, but just kind of get a feel for what's going on, where I think, you know, I'll walk in, I'll think everything's all hunky-dory, and, you know, Pam will tap me on the shoulder and say, you know, let's step outside and chat for a minute. So it's just that real deep kind of spidey sense, I call it. Judy's laughing at me.
Thanks, Patricia. Yeah, I mean, it's where I live.
I know.
I remember Greg Meyer one time tells the story. He said Greg's an 8 in Authenticate, and I'm a 1, obviously, as you know. And we were telling the story one time. This girl was standing out on the baseball field of an American baseball game, and she was singing the national anthem. And I'm like, got tears in my eyes. And Greg's like, she's not singing it that well. I'm like, oh, Greg, it's not the singing. But can you imagine, like, her parents are in the grandstand, her grandparents are probably there. They've dreamt of this moment for years, you know, and I've built this, I've got the whole thing. And next thing he's crying, and he's like, how do you even see that stuff? Like, I just saw girl sing song, you know, and that was it. And I've put this whole story behind it. And it's all imagined in my head. It probably is true. I mean, she's got parents. She's probably got grandparents. She's probably been trying. And I said, what about the nerves? Like all day, she's probably been rehearsing and getting nervous. I wonder, has she even slept last night? You know, and I've sort of attached all this other stuff to it. So it's both a strength. I can assure you there's also times it's a frustration. But yeah, seeing all of that extra depth and color, I guess he would refer to it as putting the color onto the black and white picture.
Paul, may I just share a memory that you just created? You remember Jay Henderson from North Carolina?
Yeah. How do you know Jay?
He and I have been connected since 2000.
Wow.
I'm his coach.
Oh, wow. Okay.
He's the one who provided me when you trained him there, you know, around 2011. And he said, Judy, I'm getting trained in the ID. Would you like to take the ID? You know, I have to have a couple of practice people. Okay, great. So I did it. And then I said, finally, somebody understands who I am. So he, you know, I've been telling him as we're talking that I'm on these webinars, and, you know, and I said, and, you know, I just love it. They're my family, you know, and I love Paul and I love everybody and, you know, all that kind of thing. And he said, yes, I understand. Now he's I forget exactly 7 on Authenticate.
Yes, yeah.
And so, and he said, Judy, I just love being with you. You know, what'd you get out of today's session, Jay? Anytime I can just spend with you, it's just, you know, if I can just be with you, that's all that matters. And so then he said, you know, when I talk about how great you are, he said, yes, he's great, you know, if you're just like you are to him. But when you actually work for him, you know, because he I guess, worked for you.
Yeah.
And so it was probably that case where you saw something or something, whatever happened, I don't know, the 1 and the 7. And he said, it's different then. It's different, Judy. And I'm a 5 on Authenticate, so I can go either way and I don't, you know, really care. And so it just demonstrates, once you know this and you put things together, it just makes so much sense. The more awareness you get, the more awareness you get.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Oh, what a small world. Okay, Mike.
I was just going to say your comparison between yourself and Greg. Getting back to the question of empathy, and what I call emotional, what you look at as emotional empathy. And I'm a 4 Authenticate, but I just seem to step into somebody else's shoes. And I know we've talked about resistant verify being there too, but I just, here am I, sort of an ex-rugby player, but I can turn into a blubbering mess quite quickly, the same as you just described. So I'm interested in that connection between the resistant Authenticate and that emotional empathy.
Well, you've got
Comment on
both. 'Cause I would call emotional empathy is the avoid verify, and then the authenticate. I think the avoid authenticate just you actually I don't know how to articulate the difference for you.
Something to come back to maybe.
Yeah,
But,
I'll think
yeah,
about it.
It's an interesting one, yeah.
Trying to think of how to distinguish it, but I find myself in movies and so on incredibly emotional because I feel like I don't know if I'm feeling or I'm imagining. I don't know. I have to think about that.
Paul,
I'd always.
Sorry,
Mike. I was
Ian,
just going to say. I was just going to try and clarify there because I would go. I think the empathy with the avoid verify is very much. It is you feel what they feel. It's not. Yeah. Whereas I think, like say, like Paul and myself and others who avoid authenticate, we can put ourselves. We can imagine. It's a more. It's like, oh, I can see how that could be, or I can see that. We're not feeling it, but we can see how it would be. So it's
we're feeling what we're feeling. I think that's where I thought you're going there. For me, I can see I'm feeling what I'm feeling. I'm not necessarily feeling what they're feeling. You know,
right?
That to me is the distinction. So as an avoid, that's a great insight. As an avoid authenticate, I get very emotional about it because of all that I stir up in my own imagination, reading all of that vibe and energy. But it doesn't mean I'm necessarily feeling exactly what they're feeling. I think the real talent of the avoid verify is they're actually like in the body of the person, you know, like they're feeling what that person's feeling. It's really significant to me. That's a good difference.
Can I add one other thing for myself? And I don't know if other avoid verifiers do it, but I remember when I first learned ID, and one of the things about the avoid authenticates is leverage. And one of the things I find for myself is my ability to multitask and to do it simultaneously. And I don't know if other people who avoid verify find the same thing, but I just find I can do so many more things so much more quickly because I'm just leveraging one off the other all at the same time. Now, I appreciate other drives come in there as well, but there is a lot of ability to do that multitasking.
Thanks, Gail. Yeah, I agree. Does anyone want to add to the leverage? It's an element I think a lot of people don't always understand. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add to it or has a story about it that might help the group understand it.
Paul, if I could share something, I struggled a lot with the Authenticate because I was at a time and point in my life where I manage global benefits. So you're always on, right? So you need to build that quick trust and what that looks like. But what I felt was, oh, you're in corporate world, so you have to behave this way in this box, smile, fake smiles. And that's not me, right? I'm about as salty of the earth as it comes, and I try and act with integrity every single day, right? I am there to serve people. That is me. With the Authenticate drive, I was able to put words where I felt like a chameleon because people wanted me to put on all these facades and pretenses. You had to show up certain ways. So your way of putting words and identifying the different labels that people need in order to assimilate information, right, was very helpful, where I can still be me, lead with integrity. And now we have 5 people on my team and we are just getting stuff done. And it's just like,
beautiful.
I can't thank you enough because You gave me a voice that I didn't have, and learning how to be the most authentic version of myself. Our new tagline for benefits is living your best life. So that will be rolling out soon, but love it and thank you.
That's beautiful. I'm glad you shared it, and I'm glad it's had the impact that it's had for you and for your team, Brenda. Thank you for caring enough to share that.
Yep.
Anything else before we
Can I just
go
jump in, Paul? I just wanted to share something on leverage. It was a conversation a couple of us had the other day. We were doing a bit of brainstorming. And so the story was we were doing something for one thing, and because Julian Barton, who was also on the call, Avoid Authenticate like myself, she's like, oh, we could be doing this and we could be doing that. And of course, all the Authenticates on the call going, no, we need to focus on this. And she's like, no, but we could be achieving we could be creating not just a talent spreadsheet, we could be a needs, and we could do it all at the same time. But the Authenticate is so focused. Well, we're very focused on just doing what we said we were going to do in the moment. And whereas the Avoid Authenticate, it's the leveraging the time is like trying to achieve multiple things by doing the one thing. And that's the really important part around it. But there's a real nuance, and it's important, and this helped with some of the Authenticate people, even like Tracy and Krista, who are both strong use Authenticates. I said sometimes even though we say we're leveraging, we're actually it appears that we are actually probably wasting more time. We're not leveraging, but it's the perceived outcome or the perceived benefit of what it could achieve is what we're doing. So even though in the moment the user Authenticate's looking at us going, but you're actually spending more time. We're like, yes, but potentially in the future, like this is where it could go. It's the perceived benefit of what it could be and what we could achieve. And it was a real aha moment for the user Authenticates because they're just looking at the actual thing, not at what it could be. Right. So there was a subtlety around it. So I just thought that was useful to share with the group.
Thanks, Ian. Thank you. And there's a difference there in what you're saying, too, between multitasking, which is doing several things at the same time, versus leverage is doing the one thing, but from doing the one thing, it achieves several different outcomes or benefits. You know, that's what we mean by leverage. Okay, guys, with that, we're right on cue for 9 a.m. here, 4 p.m. in the US, West Coast at least. So thank you so much for joining today and for what you've shared. It's always insightful, always helpful. I'm glad you find it beneficial, and have a great rest of day and week, and look forward to sharing more with you when we return to this. This will be in 2 weeks' time. We get to cover this again, this topic, and we'll move on to the complete drive. But thank you for today, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Happy 30th, Paul.
Bye, guys.
Happy 30th.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye. Bye.